The key ring in her hand was not hers, and we both knew it. I heard her before I saw her, the quick strike of heels on the old stone stair that spirals down to the Deep Treasury, a sound that carries in that shaft the way a coin carries when you drop it down a well. Nobody comes to the vault at that hour. Nobody comes to the vault at all without a warrant sealed by the Lord Keeper and countersigned in the king's own hand, and I had seen no warrant that week, and I had seen no king's hand. So when Queen Consort Morwenna came around the last turn of the stair with a lamp in one hand and a ring of borrowed keys in the other, I did what my post requires of me before I did anything else. I filled the doorway. I am not a large man by the measure of the tall lads in the forecourt, the ones the tourists film. I am wide rather than tall, and I have the kind of face that a sculptor would carve if he wanted to show patience without showing kindness. But the door to the Deep Treasury is narrow by design, cut that way 3 centuries ago by builders who understood that a treasury is only as strong as the width a single honest man can hold. I stood in it. I did not draw. I did not speak. I let her see the shape of me against the one lamp burning in the vestibule, and I waited for her to decide what kind of night this was going to be. "Warden Crane," she said, and she smiled, and the smile was the first lie she told me. "You gave me a fright. Stand aside, I've business below. My name is Halvard Crane, and I have kept the Deep Treasury of the Royal House of Harrogate for 19 years. Before that, I kept the outer gate, and before that I was a soldier of no distinction in a war that no one remembers well, and before that I was a boy in a village that flooded every spring, learning early that some doors you hold and some doors you let go, and the whole art of a life is knowing which is which. I tell you this so you understand I am not a man given to trembling. But I will admit the truth of that moment. My heart went hard and slow, the way it does before something that cannot be undone, because I knew what lay below, and I knew who she had come for. "Business, madam," I said, not a question. A weight set on a scale to see which way she'd lean. "The Queen's diamonds," she said it lightly as though naming a thing she'd left in another room. "The late Queen Exiled set the river collar, the drops, the great pendant they call the tear of the house. There's a state dinner in 9 days, the delegation from the Eastern courts. The king wishes me to wear the house at its best." She let the keys chime once softly against her palm. "I've come to have them brought up and cleaned, that's all. Now the door, Warden. 9 days, a state dinner." It was all plausible, and it was all a lie, and the tell was small, and it was everything. She had said the king wishes, and she had not brought me the king's warrant, and a woman who truly carried the king's wish carries his seal with it the way a man carries his own shadow. She had come down the servants' stair at an hour when the servants sleep. She had come with keys that jingled wrong. I know the weight of the true treasury keys the way I know my own teeth, and those were not they. She had come alone, without the Lord Keeper, without a clerk to sign the register, without so much as a lady to witness. A queen who wants a necklace cleaned sends for it in daylight and lets 3 officials fuss over the doing. A woman who comes at night, alone with borrowed keys, has come to take a thing before anyone can tell her no. I was the no. "The vault does not open for a cleaning, madam," I said. "It opens for a warrant, or it opens for blood." She blinked. It was the first honest thing that crossed her face all night, a flicker of not having expected the second word. "For blood." The old law of the Deep Treasury, written when the house was younger and harder than it is now, and never struck from the books because no king has ever needed to strike it. I kept my voice level, the flat register a man learns for reading orders to frighten recruits. "The Deep Treasury is not the king's strongbox, madam, whatever the court believes. It is the houses, the whole lines, the dead and the unborn together. The regalia within belongs not to whoever wears the crown, but to the crown itself, held in trust, passed down the true blood of the house. And so the door was built to answer to one thing only, the hand of the true blood-heir, or a warrant sealed by the reigning sovereign in that heir's name. Queen Exild's diamonds were entered into the house trust the day she died. They came down into that vault, and the law closed over them like water. From that hour they answer to her blood, to the crown Prince Rowan, her son, her heir, and to no other hand living, not the Lord Keeper's, not mine. Not madam, with respect that I mean, and that I will keep meaning even when you are angry with me, not yours. I had never in 19 years said so many words at that post. The vestibule swallowed them and gave back nothing. Somewhere above us, very far, a night bell tolled the quarter hour, and the sound came down the stone throat of the stair and touched us both and moved on. Morwenna stopped smiling. I want to be fair to her, because a man who guards a door for 19 years learns that the story is always larger than the moment he's standing in, and I have since learned a great deal of her story, and there is grief in it, real grief, of a kind I would not wish on any soul. But I will tell it as I saw it that night, because that is the only honest way, and the woman I saw that night had come to take the dead queen's diamonds out of the trust of the dead queen's son, and dress herself in them at a table full of foreign eyes, and let the whole world watch her become, in jewels if not in law, the thing she could never truly be. The house's mother, Isolde's replacement, the keeper of the line. You are a doorman, she said, and now the warmth was gone and something colder stood in its place, the true face under the first one. A servant with a ceremonial rifle and a title someone gave you to save the cost of a wage. You do not lecture me on law. I am the queen. You are the Queen Consort, madam. I said it gently. There is no gentle way to say it, but I tried. You are the king's wife, and I would give my life for the king and by his grace for you. That is not a small thing, and I do not mean it as one. But you are not of the house's blood, and the door below me does not know the word queen. It knows only the word heir, and you are not she. For a long moment she did not move, and I did not move, and the lamp between us burned its small, steady flame and threw both our shadows up the curved wall, so that they seemed to be two giants leaning toward one another, about to touch. Then she came up one step, close enough that I could see the fine work of her, the careful woman under the careful clothes, the diamonds already at her throat, her own, lesser stones, a consort's stones, and the emptiness in the settings where the great ones weren't. Close enough to smell the cold stone smell she'd brought down the stair with her. Open it, she said, and this ends well for you. Refuse me, and I will see you turned out of this palace before the week is done, with no pension and no name, an old man begging at the gate you used to guard. I have that power, Warden. Do not test whether I'll use it. I have been threatened before, by better men and worse. By a foreign colonel once who put the muzzle of his own sidearm against my cheek, because I would not let his motor car through the king's own gate in the king's own procession, and I stood, and he did not fire, and he is not remembered, and I am still here. So I will tell you what I told her, which is the whole of what I had to give. Then I will beg at the gate, madam, but the door stays sealed. And I reach behind me without looking. I have shut that door in the dark 1,000 times. It is written into my hands, and I found the great inner bolt, the one the old builders sank into the living rock, and I drew it home. The sound it makes is not loud. It is a single deep note, like a word spoken by the mountain the palace stands on, final and without heat. I heard it seat itself in the stone. I heard the vault of the house of Harrowgate close under my hand against the wife of the king. And then I stood in front of it in the narrow door, and I waited for the storm. The storm did not come the way I expected. That is the first thing I learned about Queen Consort Morwenna that night, and it is the thing that made her dangerous. She did not rage. Rage I could have stood against all night. Rage burns its own fuel. She went instead very still as I was, two statues in a stone room, and she looked at me with an expression I have only ever seen on the faces of gamblers and generals. The look of a mind rapidly counting, discarding, choosing, laying a new plan over the wreck of the old one before the old one has even finished falling. You'll regret this, she said at last, and there was no heat in it. That was worse than heat. Not tonight, not this week, but you'll regret it. She turned, and she went back up the stair, and her heels struck the stone slower going up than they had coming down, and I stood in the dark listening to them climb and fade until the palace above swallowed her whole. Then I lit a second lamp, and I sat on the cold bench in the vestibule where the night warden sits, and I did not sleep, and I thought about what I had done. Because here is the thing the tall lads in the forecourt never have to reckon with, the thing that separates a doorman from a guard. A rifle is easy. A rifle is for men who come at you with fists or blades, and there is no confusion in it. You meet force with the least force that ends it, and your conscience sleeps soundly. But I had not met force. I had met the wife of my king. I had drawn a bolt against a woman the king loved in the king's own house, over the king's own dead wife's jewels, and I had done it on the strength of an old law that no living soul had invoked in my lifetime, a law so old the ink of it had gone brown. If I was right, I had done my duty. If I was wrong, if there was some warrant I hadn't seen, some royal wish I'd been too proud to imagine, then I had insulted a queen and shamed the house, and I deserved every word of the ruin she'd promised me. So I did the only thing a guard can do when the ground shifts under him. I went back to the law. At first light, I did not go to my bed. I went to the keeper's registry, the long cold room off the treasury where every entry into the deep is written in a great chained book, and where the statutes of the house trust are kept in cases behind glass so old it warps the world when you look through it. I found the master clerk, a small dry man named Osric who has kept those books longer than I have kept that door, and who loves them the way other men love their children. And I told him what had happened, and I watched the color leave his face. She asked for the exiled set, he said, by name. The river collar, the drops, the tear. By name. Osric set down his pen very carefully as though it might shatter. Warden, do you know what those stones are? Not what they cost, what they are. He did not wait for me to answer. He went to a case and unlocked it with a key from a chain around his own neck and drew out a folio so old its corners had gone soft as cloth and laid it open on the slope of his desk. The tier of the house was cut for the founding queen, 600 years gone, from a single stone the first king carried out of the mountains. Every queen of the true line has worn it. Not every consort, every queen of the blood, and each of their heirs after them. When Queen Exiled died, the tear and its collar and its drops did not become the king's to give. By the deed of the trust, this deed here in my hand, signed by Exiled herself the year the crown prince was born, they passed into the keeping of the house for her heir, for Rowan, to be worn again only by the true blood of the line, or with the reigning king's sealed warrant granted in the heir's name and interest. He looked up at me, and his old eyes were wet, and I did not understand yet why. You didn't just refuse a queen a necklace, Warden Crane. You held the last thing of Exilved's that Morwenna cannot buy, marry, or command her way into, and she knows it. That's why she came at night. I have thought a great deal since about the difference between a fact and a truth. A fact is that I sealed a vault. The truth is much older and much heavier, and it took Osric and his brown ink deed to show me the whole shape of it. I had walked into the middle of a war that had been fought silently in that palace for 4 years, ever since a lonely king buried the wife of his youth and in his loneliness married a woman who has never once in all the years since been able to make herself the mother of a house that already had one, a dead one, a beloved one, whose face the whole realm still turned to on the coins and in the great hall and in the eyes of her only son. Morwenna could be Queen Consort. She could sit at the king's right hand and rule his household and raise her own 2 children high, but she could not be Exiled. And the diamonds were the proof of it, locked in the dark under my post, answering only to the dead woman's blood, refusing the living woman's hand. She had come to take that proof away, and I had shut the door. Osric, I said, the crown prince, where is he? The old clerk's face did something complicated. The Eastern March, reviewing the border garrisons with his sister the Princess Adela, 10 days hard ride, or 6 by the royal train if the train would go, which it will not because. He lowered his voice, though we were alone, because the order of the household these 2 weeks says the crown prince is not to be recalled for any matter short of the king's death. And that order, Warden, was set by the Queen Consort. The cold that went through me then had nothing to do with the Treasury heir. I understood all at once why she had chosen this week. The heir who alone could open the vault, the one hand living that the door would answer to, had been sent to the far edge of the realm and pinned there by an order dressed as care, so that for these 2 weeks the diamonds of the house answered, in practice, to no one who could reach them. No one but the woman who had made sure of it. And the only thing standing between her and the last of exiled was an old wide man in a narrow door, holding a bolt shut on the strength of a law nobody had read in 50 years. I did not sleep that day either. I went back to my post, and I stood in the door and I began, quietly, the way a man loads a rifle in the dark, to prepare. The first move came the next morning, and it came the way clever moves always come, dressed as kindness, so that to refuse it made you look like the unreasonable one. A footman brought me a letter on the household's second-best paper, sealed with the Queen Consort's own device, a swan, wings folded over a spray of thornless roses. I broke it standing up. The hand inside was a secretary's, smooth and correct, and the message was short. In light of Warden Crane's long and faithful service, and his advancing years, and the cold of the Deep Treasury which cannot be good for a man of his age, the household was pleased to offer him a lighter post, a warm one, overseeing the plate room in the west wing, effective at once. A younger man would take the vault. Warden Crane's pension would, of course, be secured. The household thanked him for his understanding. It was beautifully done. There was not a word in it a man could point to and call an attack. It thanked me. It cared for my old bones. It secured my pension, the very thing she had threatened to strip 2 nights before, now dangled as a reward for stepping aside. And it moved me off the door, gently, permanently, and put in my place a younger man who did not know the old law, who would not have read the brown-ink deed, who would open the vault the moment a queen came down the stair with a plausible reason and a firm voice, because that is what young men do when a queen is firm, and no one has taught them otherwise. I did not go to the plate room. I wrote back in my own poor hand that I was grateful beyond my deserving for the household's care, but that the wardenship of the Deep Treasury was not a post the household could grant or move at its pleasure, that by the same trust deed which governs the vault, the warden of the deep is appointed by the reigning sovereign and may be removed only by the reigning sovereign, and until such time as the king himself set his seal to my removal, I would keep the door I had sworn to keep. I sealed it with nothing because a doorman has no device, and I sent it back by the same footman, and I watched him carry my ruin up the stair because I knew what I had done. I had told the Queen Consort in writing that her hand did not reach me. The countermove came within the hour, and it was the Lord Keeper himself. Lord Keeper Ballard is a good man gone soft, the way good men go soft in old courts, not corrupt, but tired and frightened of trouble, and long since in the habit of choosing the quiet road over the right one, because the quiet road lets an old man sleep. He came down the stair puffing, with 2 clerks behind him and a paper in his hand, and he would not quite meet my eye, and I knew before he opened his mouth that he had been sent. Halvard, he said, and using my given name was itself a plea. This is unpleasant, and I want it over quickly. There has been a formal complaint. The Queen Consort states that on the night before last you were insolent, that you threatened her, that you drew a weapon. I drew a bolt, my lord, not a weapon, the great inner bolt which it is my sworn duty to draw when the vault is approached without warrant, and that your continued service is a danger to the peace of the household. He looked down at his paper as though it might have changed while he wasn't watching. I am directed to relieve you of the keys of the Deep Treasury pending an inquiry. There it was. Not dismissal, she was too clever for dismissal, which would have needed the king. Just my keys, pending an inquiry, an inquiry that would take exactly as long as she needed and no longer, during which the door would be held by whatever man she chose. I have never in my life felt so old as I did in that moment, with the good, tired Lord Keeper holding out his soft hand for the keys I had carried for 19 years, and behind his shoulder, the two clerks watching to see whether the old doorman would make it easy or hard. I made it neither. I made it lawful. "My lord," I said, "I will surrender the keys the instant you show me a warrant of removal under the king's own seal, as the trust deed requires. That is not defiance. That is the same law that put the keys in my hand, a law that binds me and binds you both. If the king has sealed my removal, I am gone before you finish reading it, and I'll thank you for it as an old man ready to rest. But if what you hold is the Queen Consort's request and not the king's warrant, then you have no more power to take these keys than she had to open that door. And, my lord, with all the respect I bear you, I think you know it, or you would have shown me the seal already instead of my own name." Lord Keeper Ballard stood there with his soft hand out, and the hand began, very slightly, to shake. And then he closed it empty and drew it back, and I saw in his tired face the exact moment a frightened man decided, for once, to be afraid of the right thing. "No seal," he admitted low. "She said the king would sign it tonight. She said it was a formality." He wet his lips. "Halvard, between us, is there truly a warrant coming? Or has she been telling me the king's will before the king has willed it?" "I don't know, my lord," I said, and it was the truth. "But I know the door doesn't open on somebody's guess at the king's will. It opens on the king's seal. Bring me the seal and I obey it, whatever it says. Bring me a guess and I keep my post. That's the whole of it. That's all I am." He looked at me a long moment. Then he did a thing I did not expect and have never forgotten. He bowed. Not the deep bow of ceremony, a small one, a soldier's dip of the head to another soldier, the kind of thing that costs a tired, frightened man everything he has left. "Keep your door, Warden," he said quietly. "And God help us both if you're wrong." Then he gathered his clerks and his unsigned paper and went back up the stair, and he did not take my keys. I thought foolishly that I had won a battle. What I had actually done was tell Queen Consort Morwenna that the lawful roads were closed to her, that she could not move me by kindness, or by complaint, or by the tired Lord Keeper. And a woman like that, when the lawful road's close, does not turn back. She looks for the road that goes around. But she found it in a boy. I should say a young man, to be fair to him, Lord Cassius, the Queen Consort's own son by her first marriage, 23. Handsome the way a knife is handsome, all edge and no weight. He came down to the treasury 2 days later, not by the servant's stair, but by the grand one, boots ringing, with a pair of household men-at-arms behind him, and a warrant in his fist that he waved at me before I could speak, the way a man waves a torch to keep off a dog. "Warden Crane," he said, pleased with himself, "by order of the household you'll open the Deep Treasury. Here's your warrant, signed, sealed, all in order. My mother tires of your obstinacy. Step aside." I did not step aside. I put out my hand for the warrant, because a warrant you are shown from 6 feet off is not a warrant, it is a bluff, and I have called a great many bluffs in 19 years at a narrow door. "May I read it, my lord?" He did not want to give it to me. I saw that at once. But there were his own men behind him, watching, and a lord who snatches back a warrant rather than let it be read has told everyone in the room exactly what the warrant is worth. So he gave it to me with a sneer to cover the giving, and I read it. It was a good forgery, better than I'd have thought that shallow young man could arrange, which told me his mother's hand was in it. The paper was right. The household hand was right. The words were right. Cassius was named the Queen Consort's deputy, empowered to enter the Deep Treasury and remove such items of the house regalia as the household should require. And there at the bottom was a seal in red wax, the seal of the royal house of Harrogate, the very seal the door was built to obey. And it was wrong. It was wrong in the one way that a man who has stood at that door for 19 years and watched 100 true warrants come down that stair would catch, and a young lord who had never carried one would never think of. The seal of the house has, worked into the wax at the base of the crown, 3 small stars for the founding king and his 2 sons, the whole first line of the blood. It is the mark of the true line, and it is the reason the seal means what it means, and it cannot be counterfeited by anyone who has not held the true matrix, which is kept in the king's own cabinet under the king's own hand. The seal on Cassius's warrant had a crown. It had no stars. Whoever had cut the false matrix had copied the crown they could see on a coin, and never known about the 3 small stars they could not, because the stars are struck so fine that they show only in the wax and never in the coined image. "My lord," I said, and I handed it back to him, "this warrant is a forgery, and I think you know it, and I am sorry for you, because your mother has handed you a rope and called it a ladder." His handsome face went white, then red. "You dare! Look at the seal, my lord. Look where the 3 stars of the line should be and count them. There are none. This wax was pressed from a false matrix. A true warrant of the house carries the mark of the blood, because the house trust answers only to the blood, and whoever made this could not make the blood, because there is no making it. That is the whole reason this door exists." I lowered my voice, because his men were listening, and a young man shamed in front of his own soldiers is a young man who does something stupid, and I did not want him stupid. "Go back up, my lord. Burn that paper. If the king's inquiry ever sees it, it hangs whoever pressed the seal, and it will not be your mother's name they find on the block. It'll be yours, because it's your fist it came down herein. She has put your name to her crime and kept her own clean. That's what she does. Go and think on that, and get yourself far from this before it falls." I do not know if I reached him. I like to think a piece of it went in, that even a shallow young man, told plainly that his mother had made him the one who would hang, feels the cold of it. He stood there breathing hard, the forged warrant crumpling in his fist, his own 2 soldiers looking anywhere but at him. And then he turned on his heel and went up the stair without a word, and I never saw the false warrant again, and I have always believed he burned it, because no such paper was ever produced at the reckoning that came, and a man does not destroy the weapon that would clear him unless he already knows in his gut it would damn him instead. 3 roads closed now: kindness, complaint, forgery. And still the diamonds lay in the dark behind me, and still the one hand that could lawfully lift them was 10 days' ride away at the edge of the realm, pinned there by her order. I stood at my post that night, and I understood, the way you understand weather coming, that she had only one road left, and it was the ugly one, and she would take it because she had run out of pretty ones. She would come for the door itself, not by law. By force, or by the appearance of force, or by some ruin of my name that would put a man of hers on the threshold with the household's blessing. And the only question left was when. The answer was, the night of the state dinner, because of course it was. Because she had told me at the very first that there was a dinner in 9 days and a delegation from the Eastern courts, and I had taken it for a lie to cover a theft, and I had been half wrong. The dinner was real. The delegation was real. And she meant to walk into that hall wearing the tier of the house at her throat, in front of every foreign eye in the realm, so that the whole world would see her crowned in Isolde's diamonds and understand at last, past all argument, whose house this was. She had 9 days when she said it. She had now 3. I have not told you about the king. I have put it off, because he is the hardest part of the story, and a man puts off the hardest part. King Alaric is not a weak man. I want that understood, because what he did, and what he failed to do, will make you think him weak, and he is not. He is a strong man broken in one place, the way a great tree can be strong in all its wood, and yet have one bad limb that will fail in a storm, and the bad limb in King Alaric is grief. He loved Queen Isolde the way the old songs mean when they use the word, which is to say more than a king is supposed to love anything but his house, And when she died, a fever, quick and merciless in the space of a single week, when the crown prince was still a boy, something in the king folded shut, and it has never quite opened again. He mourned a year. He mourned 2. And then, because a king cannot mourn forever and a lonely man is a soft target, he married Morwenna, who was beautiful and clever and kind to him in his grief. And I do not doubt she was truly kind to him, in the beginning, whatever she became. The trouble is that the king has never once in the 4 years since seen his second wife clearly. He cannot afford to. To see Morwenna clearly, he would have to admit that the thing that eased his grief was not love but the appearance of it, and that the woman he leaned on when he was falling has been, all this while, quietly working to erase the woman he fell for. No man can carry that and keep standing, so the king does not see it. He looks at his second wife and he sees the hand that pulled him out of the dark, and he is grateful, and gratitude in a strong man is the strongest chain there is. When she tells him a thing, he believes it, because to doubt her is to doubt the one comfort that let him go on living. That is the bad limb. That is the storm flaw. And Morwenna has spent 4 years learning exactly where it is and exactly how to lean her weight on it. I did not go to the king. I want to be honest about why. Partly it was rank. A warden does not walk into the king's cabinet and accuse the queen. But mostly it was that I knew what would happen if I did. She would be there first. She was always there first. I would tell the king his wife had tried to force the vault, and by the time the words were out of my mouth the king would already have heard, in her gentle voice over breakfast, that the old warden of the deep had gone strange with age, that he'd threatened her on the stair, that he was clinging to a mad reading of a dead law, that the poor old man ought really to be pensioned before he hurt someone. And the king, grateful, would believe her, because believing her is how he survives. I would not be a warden defending the house. I would be a confused old servant slandering the queen, and I would lose the door. So I did not go to the king. I went instead to the one person in that palace whom Morwenna's voice could not reach, because she was not there to be poisoned against. I went to Exiled. Not the woman was 4 years in the royal crypt. I went to her portrait. There is a gallery in the old wing, the long cold one the court never uses now because the new queen prefers the bright modern rooms, and at the end of it hangs the great state portrait of Queen Exiled in the year of her crowning, life and a half size in the deep blue of the house, with the tear of the house at her throat, the very stone, painted so true you can see the light broken inside it, and her only son, Rowan, a boy of 6, standing at her knee with his hand in hers. I stood before it a long time that night, an old man alone in a cold gallery with a dead queen, and I will not pretend I did not speak to her, because I did, though I'll not write down what I said. And when I was done speaking I looked at the boy in the painting, the 6-year-old with his hand in his mother's hand, and I thought, he is not 6. He is a man now, and he is at the edge of the realm, and he is the one hand living that this door will answer to, and every road that ends well runs through him. Get him home. Everything is getting him home. That was the shift. That was the moment the war changed shape for me. Up to then I had been a man holding a door, defending, refusing, waiting for the blow. Standing before Exilved's portrait, I understood that holding was not enough. A held door is a door that falls the moment the man in it falls, and I was one old warden against a queen with the whole household in her fist, and she had 3 days, and if I only stood and refused I would lose, because eventually she would find the road around me, and there are always roads around one man. Refusing was not winning. The only winning was the heir. I had to get Rowan home, past her order, past the 10 days of hard road in 3 days without her knowing until it was too late to stop it. And I, an old doorman who could not so much as leave my post without surrendering it, had to do this from the bottom of a stone stair. I could not do it alone. That was the second thing the portrait taught me. So I began, that night, to find the others, the few in that great poison house who still, quietly, turned toward the dead queen's face on the coins, and would turn toward it in the dark if someone gave them the chance. Old Osric was the first, and he was already mine. The master clerk had loved Exiled, in the dry way of a man who loves an institution more than he can love a person, and he hated what was being done to her trust with a cold, pure hatred that 4 years had only sharpened. When I came to him with what I meant to do, he did not argue the danger. He only asked what he could carry, and I told him. The truth, in writing, sealed and hidden, so that if Morwenna's road around me went all the way to my grave, the reckoning would still come after. Osric spent that night making a fair copy of the whole matter. The night at the vault, the false pension offer, the Lord Keeper's unsigned paper, the forged warrant with its starless seal. 3 copies, in his own unmistakable hand, and he hid one in the chained registry where no one but he could reach it, and one he gave to a man of the law in the town below the palace whom he trusted, and one he gave to me. If I am found in the river, he said, dry as ever, look to the Queen Consort and read the copy in the registry, and God be with you, Warden. He did not smile. Osric never smiled. But he gripped my arm at the door, hard, an old man's grip, and that was more than a smile from him. The second was Lady Verena, and that surprised me, and it will surprise you, because Lady Verena is Morwenna's own daughter, Cassius's sister, the Queen Consort's blood. But there is a thing that happens sometimes in the children of hard parents. One takes after the hardness and one recoils from it, and Cassius had taken the edge while his sister had taken the recoil. Verena had watched her mother work on the grieving king for 4 years, and it had sickened her, quietly, the way a thing can sicken you that you cannot say aloud because it is your own mother. She came to me, in fact, before I could think how to reach her. She came down the stair the day after Cassius's forged warrant, alone, pale, and she stood before me and said, "My brother came home white as death and burned a paper in his room and would not say why, and I think I know why, and I have come to ask you a question, Warden, and I want the true answer. Is my mother trying to break the law of the vault?" "Yes, my lady," I said. There was no gentle way, and she had asked for the true answer. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, she said, "Then tell me how to stop her without destroying my brother, because he is a fool, but he is my brother, and I will not help you hang him." And I understood then that she was worth 10 of Cassius, and that Morwenna had raised, without meaning to, the very weapon that would undo her. Because Lady Verena could go where I could not. She could carry a message out of the palace without question. She could reach the royal train. She could. And this was the thing, the whole thing. She could get word to the crown prince in the far east in her own hand, a hand the household would never think to stop, because who would suspect the Queen Consort's own daughter of carrying a message against the Queen Consort? I gave her the message that night. It was short because a long message is a caught message. It said only, "The heir is needed at the Deep. Come home by the fastest road, tell no one at court, trust the warden of the vault." And I signed it not with my name, but with a thing only the crown prince would know, a thing his mother had told me once years before, when Rowan was small and I still stood the outer gate, and the little prince used to escape his nurse and come talk to the big quiet guard, and the queen had come laughing to fetch him and thanked me and told me the boy called me, in his own private word, the Stone Man. I signed the message, "Come home." The Stone Man. Because if it reached Rowan, he would know in one breath that it was true, and that it came from someone his mother had trusted, and that his mother's memory was calling him home. Lady Verena took it, and she left the palace that same night on a plain errand nobody questioned, and she rode for the royal train, and I stood at my post and did the hardest thing a guard ever does, which is nothing, wait and hold, and trust that the thing you have set moving in the dark is moving still. 2 days now, 2 days until the state dinner, and somewhere to the east, if the message flew true, a young man was reading his dead mother's private name for an old guard and turning his horse toward home. I said the ugly road was the one she had left, and I was right, but I was wrong about its shape. I had thought she would come at the door with force. She was cleverer than that. She came at the man. On the morning of the day before the dinner, 2 officers of the household watch came down the treasury stair. Not men I knew, new men, Cassius's friends by the cut of them. And they told me, very correct, very cold, that a grave charge had been laid against Warden Halvard Crane. That a quantity of the house plate, silver of great value, had been found missing from the treasury inventory, and that the missing pieces had been discovered that very morning in the warden's own quarters, wrapped in the warden's own cloak, hidden under the warden's own bed. I was under arrest for theft from the Deep Treasury, the very thing I had spent 19 years guarding against. I was to surrender my keys and come with them to be held pending the king's justice. I have been afraid a few times in my life. I was afraid then, not of the charge was a lie and lies can be broken. I was afraid because I saw, all at once, the beauty of it, the terrible completeness of it. She did not need me convicted. She only needed me off the door for a day. Arrest the warden for theft, march him away in irons before the whole household, so that no man would take his word for anything ever again. Put a fresh young watchman on the vault with orders from the household. And then, tonight or tomorrow, come down the stair with a firm voice and a plausible warrant and a queen's certainty. And let the young man, who did not know the old law, who had just watched the old warden dragged off as a thief, open the door. She would have the diamonds by the dinner. And when Rowan came home at last, if he came home at all, he would find his mother's stones already worn, already claimed, already a fact the world had swallowed, and an old thief in a cell swearing a mad story about a law nobody had read. It was a good plan. It nearly worked. I want you to feel how nearly, because the whole meaning of what came after is in how nearly it worked. I did not resist the officers. A man who resists arrest confesses guilt with his body, whatever his mouth says, and I would give her nothing to point at. I said only, the keys of the Deep Treasury cannot pass to any man but by the king's sealed warrant. I'll come with you gladly and answer any charge before the king. But the keys stay on this ring at my belt until the king's own seal takes them, or you'll have committed the very theft you're charging me with, taking the warden's keys without the sovereign's warrant. And I saw the 2 young officers hesitate because I had said it loud, and Osric had come out of his registry to hear it, and a lie works best in the dark, and I had just lit a lamp. They did not take the keys. They took me, but not the keys. They marched me up the long stair between them, and the last thing I saw of my post in 19 years, or so I believed in that moment, was old Osric standing in the door of his registry, and as I passed he met my eye and gave me the smallest nod, and I understood. Hold on. The thing is still moving in the dark. They put me in a cell in the old watchtower, a decent enough room with a barred window that looked east, and there I sat through the afternoon and into the evening of the day before the state dinner, an old man in a stone room, listening to the palace prepare for its great night above me, the carriages arriving, the musicians tuning, the whole bright machine of a court putting on its face for the foreign delegation. And I thought, she has won. She will go down to the vault tonight, and a frightened boy will open it, and tomorrow she will wear the tear of the house to the dinner, and I am in a cell, and Rowan is God knows where, and there is nothing more that one old doorman can do. That was the false dawn turned inside out, not a moment when it looked one, but the black hour when it looked wholly lost, and every reasonable thought in my head told me to give it up, to save what was left, to let the young officers have the keys and be an old man who tried and failed. Hold the keys and you die a thief. Give them up and you live a fool. That was the choice she had built for me, and both roads ended with the diamonds hers. I held the keys. I sat in that cell with the ring of them in my fist, the true keys of the deep, the keys her false warden could not use because the great inner bolt I had drawn that first night is not on the ring at all. It is sunk in the living rock, and it draws back only to a hand that knows the trick of it in the dark, a trick that lives in my hands and in no document, taught to me by the warden before me who was taught by the warden before him, back and back to the builders. She could put any man she liked on that door. Without me, or the trick that only I now living carried, the bolt would not draw and the true keys would not turn, and the door would not open for anyone, not for a false warden, not for a firm queen, not for the whole household in a body. I had not just refused to open the vault. By holding the keys and holding the trick, I had made the vault unopenable by any hand but the heirs, exactly as the old law intended, from inside a cell where they thought they had beaten me. She could not force the door. She could only free the man who held it, and she would sooner die than do that. So it was a siege now, and both of us knew it, and the only question left was which arrived first, her hour or the heir. Full dark, the music above me swelling and fading, and then on the road below the east window, so faint at first I thought I dreamed it out of wanting, the sound of horses. Hard-ridden horses, a small fast party, coming up the eastern road toward the palace in the dead of night, when no honest traveler rides. I stood at the barred window with my old heart going like a drum, and I watched the torches of them come up out of the dark, and I counted them, 6 riders, mud to the waist, horses foundering, and at their head, bareheaded, riding like a man who has not slept in 3 days because he has not, a young man in a plain dark coat with his mother's own bones in his face. The crown prince had come home. I could not go to him. That is the cruelty of a cell. The very hour your labor bears fruit, you are locked away from the picking of it. So I did what I could. I shouted. I am an old man with a young man's chest, a soldier's chest, trained to carry across a parade ground, and I put the whole of it into the one word that mattered, out through the barred window into the dark where the horses were. The vault. My lord, go to the vault. They mean to open it tonight. I do not know if he heard the words. But a man riding into his own palace at midnight after 3 days without sleep, a man summoned home by his dead mother's name, hears a voice like that from a tower window and knows it is the voice that summoned him. I saw him rein up. I saw him turn his mud-spattered face up toward the sound. And I saw him wheel his horse toward the palace and drive it up the last of the road at a dead gallop, and his 6 riders behind him, and I lost them under the wall. Then I could do nothing but wait and pray, and piece the rest of it together afterward from those who saw it, from Lady Verena, who had ridden the whole way east and back at her prince's side, and told me all of it later with her hard mother's chin and her own kind eyes, from old Osric, who had crept up the treasury stair to watch, from the Lord Keeper Ballard, who found, at the last, the spine to be in the right place at the right hour. So the scene I give you now I did not see. But I have heard it so many times from so many mouths that agree that I can set it down as true, and I will set it down as though I stood there, because in every way that matters I did. At the moment the crown prince rode through the palace gate, Queen Consort Morwenna was already at the bottom of the treasury stair. She had come down at last, on the night of her choosing, in the full state of her office, the consort's coronet, the deep house blue, and every diamond she owned in the world, which was many and fine, and not one of them, the tear. The empty settings at her throat were the whole reason she was there. Behind her came her false warden, the young watchman she had set on my post, holding the ring of ordinary keys she had given him, which opened the outer grills well enough and could not, touch the great bolt in the rock. And behind him came 2 household officers, and a clerk with a book to make it all look done in order, and the whole small false procession of a woman about to take by main strength the one thing law and blood had told her she could not have. She reached the door, my door, and she found it shut and bolted with the deep bolt, and her young watchman's keys turned in the outer locks and did nothing at the heart of it, because the heart of it answers to a hand and a trick and not to a key at all. I have often thought of her in that moment, the beautiful, clever, ruthless woman who had planned this for weeks, who had exiled the heir and framed the warden and forged the seal and arrested the one man who stood in her way, standing at last before the open path she had cleared with such care, and finding the door still shut, as though the old law itself had reached up out of the brown ink and set its own hand against her. Her watchman heaved at the door and it did not move. He tried every key on the ring, and the great note of the bolt did not sound. and Morwenna stood there in all her diamonds, so close, and could not get in. That is where Rowan found her. He came down the stair 3 at a time, filthy from the road, sword still at his hip from the border, and behind him came Lady Verena, and behind her. This is the part that turns the whole story, the part I could not have arranged and did not dare to hope for. Behind her came King Alaric himself. Because Verena, riding home at the prince's side, had done the one thing I had not dared to do, the thing only a daughter of Morwenna's own blood could do and be believed. She had gone, the moment they reached the palace, not to the vault but to the king. And she had said to him, his stepdaughter, the Queen Consort's own child, weeping, "Father, my mother is at the Deep Treasury this hour, trying to force the vault of the house against the law of the blood, and she has framed an honest warden for theft to clear her road. And if you love the memory of Queen Isolde, you will come now and see it with your own eyes before it is done." A daughter accusing her own mother. There is no lie in the world that can stand against that. The king could not tell himself she was a mad old servant with a grudge, or a rival scheming for advantage. She was Morwenna's own girl, gaining nothing, losing everything, come to him in tears to save a dead woman's honor and a living stranger's neck. And the bad limb of the king's grief, the stormflaw that had let him be blind for 4 years, could not bear that weight, and it broke at last the right way. He believed her, and he came down the stair behind his son to see for himself. So it was that Queen Consort Morwenna, turning from the door she could not open, found herself looking up the stair into 3 faces at once. Her daughters, streaked with tears, the crown prince's, hard as his mother's portrait, and the king's, her husband, seeing her for the first time in 4 years, clearly. There was a silence in that stone vestibule that Osric says he will hear until he dies. Then the king spoke, and Osric says his voice was very quiet, and that the quiet was the most terrible thing about it. "Morwenna," said King Alaric, "what are you doing at the door of the Deep Treasury, at midnight, dressed in every jewel of the house but one?" She was magnificent, I'll give her that. She did not fall to pieces. She turned and she gathered herself, and she made the smile she had made at me that first night, the warm one, the first lie. "My love, you're tired, you've been ill-informed, this is nothing. The state dinner. I came to see the house regalia readied. The old warden had let the inventory fall into such disorder. There was even plate found missing from his own rooms. I've had to have him held. I only came to set it right for our guests. Verena is overwrought. She's misunderstood." "The warden," said the Crown Prince Rowan, stepping down past his father, "sent me a message 4 days ago to the Eastern March past your order that I not be recalled. He signed it with a name my mother gave him when I was 6 years old, a name you could not have known, a name no one living knew but him and me and her. He came to the bottom of the stair, and he stood before his stepmother, mud to the waist, and he was not loud either, and the not loudness ran in the family. So do not tell me the warden is a thief and a madman, madam. The warden is the only man in this palace who kept faith with my mother's house, while I was sent to the edge of the realm to be out of the way. And I would very much like to know why you needed me out of the way, to ready a necklace for a dinner." Morwenna's smile did not fall so much as freeze. "Rowan." "Open it," said Rowan. She went still. "Open the vault," said the Crown Prince. "You've come all this way, madam, dressed for it. The door's right there. If there's nothing in this but a cleaning and a dinner, then open it and show us all the honest business you came to do." He held her eyes. "Go on. Take your warden's keys and open the Deep Treasury of the House of Harrowgate. Open it in front of the king." And she could not. Of course she could not. Everyone in that vestibule knew she could not, and the knowing filled the room like water filling a boat. She stood before the door she had schemed for weeks to reach, with the keys her false warden held out to her, in front of her husband and her stepson and her own weeping daughter, and she could not make the vault of the house open 1 inch, because the vault of the house does not open for her, has never opened for her, will never open for her, and the whole realm was about to understand exactly why. The old law was not a dusty line in a brown book. It was a locked door in a stone room, and it was refusing her to her face, and there was not a thing on earth her power could do about it. "You see," said the king softly, "that it will not open for you." "It's the warden's trick," she said, and her voice cracked for the first time, the careful woman coming apart at the one careful seam. "He's rigged it, Alaric. He's sabotaged the mechanism out of spite. That old man, he's—" "No," said a dry voice from the shadows. And old Osric came forward with the brown-ink deed in his hands, the founding trust, 600 years of it, and he held it up to the king's own lamp. "The mechanism is not rigged, Majesty. The mechanism is the law. This door was built to answer only to the true blood of the house, or to your Majesty's own sealed warrant granted in the heir's name. And the Queen Consort brought no such warrant, because your Majesty never signed one, because your Majesty never knew. She had a forged one made. My hand can show you the false seal it bore, the seal with no stars of the line, for whoever cut the false matrix could not know the mark of the blood he was counterfeiting. That is the whole meaning of this vault, Majesty. It cannot be tricked or forced or married or willed. It can only be entered by the blood. The warden did not sabotage the door. The warden kept it, which is the entire of his office, and he kept it against the queen and against the Lord Keeper and against arrest and against ruin, because your Majesty's own law told him to, and no one else in this palace would." Osric lowered the deed and looked, dry and unafraid, at his king. "He has been in a cell since noon, Majesty, on a false charge of theft for the crime of doing his duty. I would take it as a great kindness if someone would let the old man out." "They let me out. I came down the Treasury stair for what I believed might be the last time, between the two young officers who had arrested me and who now would not meet my eye, and I came into that vestibule and I saw them all, the king, the crown prince, Lady Verena, old Osric, the Lord Keeper Ballard who had found his way down at last, and Queen Consort Morwenna in all her frozen diamonds with her back to the door she could not open. And I did the only thing I know how to do, which is my post. I went past all of them, past the king himself, and I put my old hands on my door, and I felt for the trick of the bolt in the dark of the rock the way I have felt for it 10,000 times, and I drew it back. The great deep note sounded in the stone, and I turned to the crown prince, and I said the words the law gave me to say, the words I had waited 19 years to have a reason to say. "The deep treasury of the house of Harrogate, my lord. It opens for the true blood of the line. It waits for your hand." And Rowan, mud to the waist, 3 days without sleep, his dead mother's face on his own, put his hand to the door of the house, and it opened for him. It swung wide as it has swung for every true heir of the blood back to the founding, silent on its old iron, and the lamplight went in ahead of us into the deep. And there on their stands in the cold, pure dark lay the diamonds of the house, the river collar, the drops, and the great pendant they call the tear of the house, 600 years of the true line, waiting as they had always been waiting, for the blood that owned them and no other hand alive. The crown prince stood a long moment looking at his mother's stones, then he did not touch them. He turned instead to the king and he said, "They're safe, father, they were always safe. One old man kept them safe." And then to me quietly, so that only I quite heard it, "The stone man, she called you that, did she? She had the right of it, you didn't move." His eyes were wet and he did not care who saw. "Thank you for not moving." I could not speak. A guard is not supposed to weep at his post, and I did not quite, but it was a near thing, and I am not ashamed of the nearness. The king did not shout at his wife. I have thought since that a lesser man would have, and that the not shouting was the measure of him, that even broken in his one place, even 4 years blind, King Alaric had enough of the true metal in him to meet the worst hour of his marriage with a terrible quiet rather than a rage. He turned from the open vault, and he looked at Queen Consort Morwenna a long time, and when he spoke his voice had the flatness of a man reading a sentence he has just written on his own heart. "I married you," he said, "because I was drowning and you gave me your hand. I have never forgotten it, and I do not forget it now. But I see tonight what I would not let myself see, that from the hour you gave me your hand you have been using it to reach for hers." He looked at the diamonds on their stands in the dark. "Exiled, the houses. You could not be her, so you meant to wear her and let the world call it the same thing. And when the law of the blood stood in your way, you did not stop. You exiled her son, you forged my seal, you framed an honest man for theft and put him in a cell. His voice did not rise, it sank, which was worse. You made my daughter by marriage choose between her mother and the truth, and thank God she chose the truth, or I would be an old fool in a bright room to the end of my days, and the house would be robbed, and this man would be ruined, and I would never once have known." "Alaric," she began, and this time there was no smile at all, nothing careful left, only the woman under all the women, and she was frightened, and I would be lying if I said I felt nothing at the sight of it. "Alaric, please, everything I did it for us. For the standing of this house, you cannot let one dead woman's." "Do not," said the king, "speak of her. You have not the right, and after tonight you never will again." And that was the end of Queen Consort Morwenna's reaching, and she seemed to know it, for she said nothing more, and the frozen diamonds at her throat threw back the lamplight in little broken pieces, and she looked, for the first time since I had known her, exactly her age. The judgment came in the days that followed, and it was the king's alone to give, and he gave it in the old hall before the assembled court, which is as it should be, for a wrong done in the dark of a vault is set right in the light of the house. I will not pretend it was simple. A king cannot cast off a queen consort the way a man turns out a thieving servant. There are treaties in it, and her children, and the standing of the realm, and Alaric weighed all of it as a king must. But the heart of the judgment was clean, and it was this: Queen Consort Morwenna was stripped of every office and honor of the household. She kept her title for the sake of the realm and the treaties, but title was all she kept, no key, no seal, no voice in the running of the house, no place at the king's right hand. She was removed to the dower house at the far edge of the royal park, to live out her years in comfort and in silence, and she was forbidden the palace, and forbidden, above all and forever, the deep treasury and every jewel of the house. The reaching was over. The hand that had grasped so long for Isolde's stones would never come within a mile of them again. And Lord Cassius, I had feared for him, oddly, having warned him at the door, and I need not have troubled myself, for the king is a just man and a merciful one. It came out in the inquiry that the forged seal had been cut at Morwenna's order and pressed by her own creatures, and that Cassius had been the fool who carried it and not the villain who made it, and the king, who had watched a mother use a son as a shield, would not finish her work by breaking the boy. Cassius was sent from court in disgrace to a far estate to learn the management of land and the keeping of accounts under an honest steward, a punishment, but a kind one, the kind that leaves a man a road back if he has the wit to walk it. And Lady Verena the king raised. He named her in that same hall a lady of the household in her own right, keeper of the Queen Isolde gallery and the house charities that had been Isolde's, and he did it with the whole court watching, and he said, so that all could hear it, "Her mother reached for this house with a false hand. This one gave it her true one at the cost of her own blood. Let the realm remember which of them was worthy of it." I have never seen a young woman stand so straight as Verena stood then, nor weep so quietly, and I thought, Morwenna raised one child who was her ruin and one who was her redemption, and she can claim no credit for either, but the house is the richer for the second, and that is as near to justice as this world usually comes. And the Crown Prince Rowan I have saved for last, because what he did in that hall is the thing that made me, an old plain doorman, understand that the house was safe in the hands that would inherit it. He asked leave of his father to speak, and the king gave it, and Rowan came down and stood before the court, and he did not speak of his stepmother at all. He spoke of the vault. He said that a great wrong had very nearly been done, and had been stopped by one thing only, not by his own return, which came too late, not by the king's justice, which came after, but by an old law that a long-dead builder had written into stone, and by one old man who had chosen to keep that law when every power in the palace told him to break it. And then he asked, of his father and the whole court, the question I think he had been turning over the length of that hard ride home. What is a law worth, if the only thing that keeps it is one man's willingness to be ruined for it? Warden Crane held that door against the Queen, against the Lord Keeper, against arrest, against the loss of his name and his pension and his liberty, on the strength of a statute so old that no one living had read it, and he was right, and had he been 1 degree less stubborn the house would have been robbed, and none of us the wiser. That is too fine a margin. A house should not survive by the luck of having one honest man in the right door at the right hour. It should survive by law that cannot be bent, kept by men who cannot be moved, and honored by a crown that knows their worth before the crisis and not only after. Then he turned to me, and before the whole court he said the thing that I will carry to my grave. "The old warden calls himself a doorman," said the Crown Prince Rowan. "He is wrong. A doorman keeps a door for whoever pays him. This man kept a door for the dead and the unborn, against the living and the powerful, for nothing but the law and my mother's memory. There is a word for that, and it is not doorman. It is guardian, and the house of Harrogate owes him a debt it can never pay and will begin tonight to try." And the king rose. The whole court rose with him, because when the king rises all rise, but the king had risen for me, for an old wide man with a sculptor's patient face who had spent 19 years in a stone room at the bottom of a stair, unseen, keeping a door, and he came down from his place, and he took my old hand in both of his, and he said, so quietly that it was only for me, "You kept faith with her when I could not. You kept faith with the house when I would not. I do not know how to thank a man for that, Warden, but I will spend what's left of my reign learning." I told him because it was true, and because a guard must always tell his king the truth even when the king is weeping, and so is he, that he owed me nothing, that I had only stood where I was put and done what I was for, and that any man of the guard would have done the same. And the king looked at me with his broken, mending face, and he said, "No, they would not. That is the whole point of you. Most men would have opened the door." And I had no answer to that, because he was right, and I have thought about it every day since, and I think it is the truest thing anyone has ever said to me. Most men would have opened the door. I have wondered in the years after why I did not. I am not a brave man, whatever the songs the palace made of it afterward would tell you. I was frightened the whole way through, of the Queen, of ruin, of the cell, of dying a named thief with a mad story on my lips. I did not hold the door because I was without fear. I held it because I had decided, a very long time ago in a flooding village, watching my father hold a door of sandbags against a river that took everything else we owned, that a man is not the sum of what he is afraid of. A man is the sum of what he holds anyway. My father held his door and the river took the house behind it regardless, and he wept, and I thought as a boy that he had failed. I understand now that he did not fail. The house was only wood. What he held was something the river could not take, and he passed it to me across that terrible night without a word, and I have been holding it ever since, in one narrow door after another, all the way down to the last and deepest one. You hold the door, not because holding it will always save what's behind it, because holding it is what makes you a man worth putting at a door. So that is the true account of the night the vault of the house was sealed against the Queen Consort, set down by the man who sealed it, so that the story the palace tells, which has grown in the telling until I hardly know myself in it, may be measured against the plain truth. I have tried to be fair to all in it, even to Morwenna, whose grief and loneliness were real however cruel her reaching became, and who lives yet, an old woman in the dower house at the edge of the park, and who once, they tell me, asked to see the exiled gallery one last time and was gently refused, and wept, and I confess I felt for her in that, whatever she was. Reaching for a thing you can never have will hollow out the best of souls, and Morwenna was never the best of souls, and it hollowed her to nothing, And there is a warning in that for every one of us who ever wanted what was not ours to hold. I am an old man now, older than I was that night by more years than I would have thought I had left in me. The crown Prince Rowan is King Rowan these 2 years, since his father followed Exiled into the crypt at last, at peace, his one place mended before the end. And on the day King Rowan was crowned, he did a thing that no king had done before, and that I am told will now be done at every crowning of the house forever after. Before he took the great regalia from the Deep Treasury for his crowning, the collar and the drops and the tier of the house that his mother wore in her portrait, he came down the treasury stair, in his crowning robes, with the whole court behind him, to the narrow door at the bottom, and he asked the Warden of the Deep for leave to enter. He asked me. And I drew the great bolt, and I heard its deep note sound in the stone as it has sounded for 600 years, and I said the words, "It opens for the true blood of the line, my lord, it waits for your hand." And the king of the house of Harrowgate bowed his head to an old doorman before he claimed his crown, so that no king of this house will ever again forget that the regalia is not his to seize but his to be granted, held in trust for the blood, kept by a guardian, answering to the law and not to the power, which is the whole and only reason a crown is worth the wearing. I still keep the door. King Rowan offered me every honor and every rest, and I took the honors gladly for the sake of the office, but I would not take the rest. A guardian without a door is only an old man, and I am not ready yet to be only an old man. So I stand my post at the bottom of the stone stair, in the narrow door the builders cut wide enough for one honest man, and I keep the diamonds of the house in the dark for the blood that owns them. And when I hear heels on the stair at an hour when no one should come, I still fill the doorway, out of habit and out of oath, though it is only ever the young king now, or his lady, or one of the fair small heirs he has begun to bring down to show them the door their line will one day open. Never a thief in the dark again, God be thanked, but I fill the doorway all the same, because that is what I am, and a man should know what he is and hold to it. The door stays sealed until the true blood comes to open it. That is the law. I am the man who keeps the law. It is enough. It has always been enough. It is the whole of what I have to give, and I have given it, and I would give it again, the same night, the same queen, the same cell, the same fear, 100 times over, and count myself, every time, the richest old man in the realm, for having had one door in all the world that was worth the holding. I fill the doorway, I hold the door, the blood may enter, no other hand alive. That is the end of it, and the truth of it, and I have set it down as it was.